Welcome to the very first episode of Trope Turnaround, where we take a common but underutilized trope from fiction and try to create a story with that trope as the central element. This episode will be looking at the hyperdrive. I'm defining a hyperdrive as any technology or magic used in a narrative to get characters from point A to point B without having to worry about the pesky logistics of how long it takes to travel that distance or how immersion breaking it would be to have characters appear 1,000 kilometers away without any dramatic shots of New Zealand landscapes. The first half of this video will be describing and analysing various hyperdrives in popular media, then the second half will take what we learned and try to make a hyperdrive the centerpiece of a story. So let's start with the hyperdrive in Star Wars, which is perhaps the most iconic example. In Star Wars, it's stated that to go faster than light, you move into a different dimension called hyperspace. But there's a complication, because in hyperspace, large objects or massive objects create mass shadows. So what you need to do is complete a whole bunch of complex calculations in order to avoid any collisions with these mass shadows. And that stays pretty consistent throughout Star Wars until episodes 8 and 9, but we don't talk about that. And this explanation is used in various media, that you're going into a different dimension and traveling there in order to travel faster than light in our dimension. It's pretty simple. So next we go on to Star Trek, where we find the warp drive, which is a little different to most spaceship hyperdrives in popular media. Instead of moving through a different dimension of space-time, the warp drive, as its name suggests, warps space-time around itself to effectively decrease the distance between the ship and its destination. That's a bit of an oversimplification. Actually, it's a lot of an oversimplification, but the full explanation involves the writers trying to adhere to the theory of general relativity as much as they possibly can, which is commendable, but also annoying for a video like this. The warp drive is very consistent throughout Star Trek films and series, very much serving as an easy way to ignore the vast distances between locations in the Star Trek universe. Keeping with our star theme, let's move on to Stargate and its titular hyperdrive. Despite what the title may suggest, the Stargates are not the centerpiece of the plot, but rather a plot device used to get the main characters to new and exotic locations for, the plot. The Stargate is an ancient device that's functionally a configurable portal. Dial in the coordinates of another Stargate and you can pop out the other side. No spaceships required. That's about it for Stargates. Nice and simple. Now, the Marvel Cinematic Universe has no less than 8 hyperdrives. Yeah, 8. God damn it, Marvel, just pick one. But anyway, let's go through them in order of appearance. The first one that appears is the Bifrost. It's described as a device that creates Einstein-Rosen bridges. You need this big structure in order to shoot a wormhole at another planet. And that's all it is, but it uses a whole lot of energy, and so Loki uses it in the first Thor film to try to destroy the realm of Jotunheim. That remains pretty consistent throughout the second and third Thor films as well. And then we get to Infinity War, where Heimdall can summon the Bifrost with a prayer, and then Thor can acquire a magic axe that can summon the Bifrost. We needed this large apparatus for it before. No. Now we just need a prayer or an axe. Anyway, the next one we see is the Space Stone. The Space Stone is literally just a stone that lets you control space, and so you can travel through space. You can create wormholes wherever you like. And that's completely consistent. It's Space Stone. It's very nice. Until it becomes a MacGuffin that Thanos just sticks on his shiny glove. But anyway, then we have whatever the hell was going on in Thor: The Dark World with those wormhole-y things. Some people may say this isn't a hyperdrive because actually it was just the effects of the convergence. To them I say, you're wrong. Because in fact Loki knew a route to get to Svartalfheim, which presumably he knew prior to the convergence. So these wormholes are present leading to Svartalfheim, and presumably they're the same kind of wormhole that leads to the planet of Sakaar in Ragnarok. I mean, there's nothing really complicated about them. They're just wormholes that lead from one point in space to another. It's a very simple hyperdrive and very clearly a plot device just used to get from one point in space to another point in space. Nice and easy. Then in Guardians of the Galaxy, we're introduced to jump points. Now, jump points, yeah, they exist. When we see the Guardians or any other spaceship travel through a jump point, we see this hexagonal pattern, a very clearly artificial pattern. We know that these are some kind of infrastructure in space that for some reason the whole galaxy just has an agreement that they don't mess with. Because I mean, if I were an isolationist planet and I had enough technology to understand, or if I had advanced enough technology to understand the jump points, I would probably destroy all of the ones near enough to my star system to just get rid of them. I don't want these here. Take them away. But no, we don't do that. We simply just leave the jump points there. Because there's an agreement. What is the agreement? We don't know. I'd love to see that, Marvel. Show us what the agreement is about the jump points. Why are there just infrastructure in space that no one messes with? No one sabotages it. No one does anything. Anyway, I'll stop on that tangent. Sling rings. The next hyperdrive we're introduced to are sling rings, which we are told assist sorcerers in traveling the multiverse. Until they don't. Because America Chavez needed it to be special, and sling rings traveling the multiverse would make her not special. And so, of course, sling rings no longer travel the multiverse, they just travel our universe. So yeah. And then in Avengers Endgame, we're introduced to quantum realm travel. They have this big device, they go into the quantum realm, and then they come back out anywhere in time and space. Basically, it enables a time travel plot, and that's about it. And then in Loki, we get TemPads, which are orange, the same color as sling rings. Is there a connection there? Probably not. I think they were just needed to have a fun Doctor Who-like travel through time and space for the Loki series, and I'm okay with that. And not central to anything, really. They just kind of exist. Then, of course, as I alluded to before, we have America Chavez's thing, portals between multiverses that can go basically anywhere in the universe and are the shape of a star. Very fun. And yeah, that's all the hyperdrives I can be bothered to dig up from the MCU. I'm sure there are more, but I just don't care. Now, at this point, to my knowledge, for you DC fanboys out there is only one example of a hyperdrive in the DC extended universe, that being the boom tubes used by Steppenwolf, or I suppose rather those used by Fallen Wolf and Landon Wolf before he learned how to walk. Boom tubes are tubes that go boom when they transport someone through space. A very descriptive name. Doctor Who also has a hyperdrive, the Time Vortex. You thought I was going to say the TARDIS, didn't you? But no, the TARDIS is a vehicle that traverses the Time Vortex. So are vortex manipulators, like the one used by Captain Jack Harkness. Doctor Who does have a few episodes in which the Time Vortex is the central element, which is to be expected when you have over 300 hours of content spanning more than 800 episodes. I'm not going to go into any of those episodes, though, because usually plot lines involving heavy use of the Time Vortex get very complicated very quickly, and while I do have time for that, I don't feel like it. And we can't talk about hyperdrives without mentioning the infinite improbability drive from The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, which passes through every conceivable point in every conceivable universe instantaneously to get you to where you need to go. Basically, it's somewhere, then it's everywhere, then it's somewhere again, which it's able to do because the second somewhere must be one of the somewheres within the everywhere that's being occupied. So all you need to do is get rid of all the other somewheres. Then you only have one left, which is exactly where you need to be. It's the most wonderfully absurd explanation given for any hyperdrive in any piece of fiction anywhere, and a great way to justify doing whatever the hell you want. So now that we've gone through a few hyperdrives, let's move on to the second part of the video, where we try to turn hyperdrives into the central element of a story. We've seen hyperdrives used as a convenient plot device to remove the annoyance that is interstellar travel in Star Wars and Star Trek. We've seen them used as a way to justify telling whatever story the writer wants to tell in Stargate and The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. And we've also seen hyperdrives as an abstract and essential part of the universe, but still mostly relegated to the background in Doctor Who. And obviously there's also whatever the hell Marvel is doing. So how do we make hyperdrives central to the plot? Let's start by picking a type of hyperdrive. I think simplest is best for now, so we'll go with an engine that makes things go really fast. A tachyon drive, maybe. Tachyons being hypothetical faster-than-light particles. We'll say our engine converts the vehicle and its occupants into tachyons to allow them to travel faster than light, then converts them back into regular matter at the destination. The inventor of the tachyon drive added a safeguard, so the engine won't transform the vehicle back into regular matter until it's traveling at non-relativistic speeds, that is, slow enough that weird things aren't happening to spacetime. But what if someone found a way to remove that safeguard? Well, it requires a lot of energy to get an object to relativistic speeds. We had to build an 8-kilometer wide circle of electromagnets just to get a few subatomic particles to near light speed on Earth. If we convert out of tachyon form at 99% of the speed of light, that energy has to come from somewhere. I'm thinking it comes from converting the matter of the vehicle into energy, kinetic energy specifically, by E equals mc squared. Now that we've killed everyone inside, we can get to the fun part. If a hunk of spaceship is crashing through a planet's atmosphere at 99% of the speed of light, it's going to be hitting air particles very, very fast. Definitely fast enough for the atoms to fuse together. And what happens when atoms fuse together? Big boom. One sabotaged spaceship could end life on a whole continent, maybe a whole planet if it's big enough. Now what if this happened? A spaceship apparently malfunctions and wipes out a whole planet. There would be public outcry. How was this allowed to happen? The government of our world does their best to calm the people. It was a freak accident. It'll never happen again. But then it does. A second spaceship crashes into a second planet at near light speed only a week later. It's not an accident. Someone did this on purpose. When our protagonist tracks down the man behind the destruction, he reveals the truth. He was under orders. Those planets were harboring enemies of the government. The civilian casualties were justified because they've now prevented the greater casualties of a war that will never come. Our protagonist won't accept this. It was genocide, plain and simple. Now, the story has written itself up to this point, but now we have a choice. Is our world democratic or autocratic? You might not think that makes a difference, but here's the interesting thing. The style of government will determine who our protagonist needs to convince to overthrow it, or at least stop this particular evil plan. To fight against the government, our protagonist needs resources. If the government is a democracy, then the resources will be with the largest cohorts. They have the voting majority, so they can sway public policy to their benefit, and thus they will have installed a government that increases their personal prosperity. If the government is an autocracy, however, the resources will be with the smallest cohorts, because the demand for workers never changes, but amongst smaller cohorts the supply is lower, so members of these cohorts are free to demand higher wages. You see, this one tiny piece of world building sets the tone for the whole story. If the government is a democracy, then our protagonist must rally the people against the government's terrible plot. Our protagonist is a charismatic leader who stands up for what's good and right in an epic and spectacular narrative. The people might swarm spaceports and stop any ships from taking off in protest, or form a blockade around the home planet of their greatest enemies to stop another genocide. If the government is an autocracy, however, then our protagonist must work in the shadows, making and breaking deals and promises as they go. Our protagonist is a morally grey character wrapped up in politics and espionage. This story is much darker, pitting one hero or a small group of heroes against impossible odds. The tachyon drive could be used in inventive ways, like fight scenes in tachyon form with insane physics, as our protagonist intercepts a ship intended to wipe out a third planet. Throughout the narrative, whichever of the two paths we choose, there would be philosophical discussions surrounding the tachyon drive. Is it okay to keep using this technology when it can be weaponized with such catastrophic consequences? But if we stop using it, what if someone secretly keeps producing tachyon drives? There would be no way to stop them. So then, is it better if everyone has this technology? Because then no one would dare to try to use it as a weapon for fear of the tachyon apocalypse. But what if that's what someone wanted? In that case, do we get rid of every tachyon drive? Then we'd lose all the conveniences and benefits that come with them, like avoiding the decades-long trip between star systems and being able to send messages so much faster than the archaic radio waves could. At this point, the tachyon drive starts to symbolize nuclear weapons. The entire story becomes an allegory for nuclear weapons, and now we have to choose whether to let the reader decide their own stance or offer our own opinion on the subject. Either way, hyperdrives just became a lot more interesting. Thanks for watching this episode of Trope Turnaround. Let me know if you'd like to see more, and if so, what underutilized trope should I cover next?